This is Mike Useem. I'm on the faculty here at the Wharton School, and I have the privilege today of sitting down with Mary McVey, who is the co-founder of Soccer Without Borders. And we're going to be talking next few minutes about that sport and Mary's building of a worldwide network of people who work with young people, with women in some countries, those who are refugees, to help them through soccer keep their feet on the ground and get forward in life. So, Mary, great to have you here in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Look forward to our dialogue. Let's just start maybe a little bit with you. I think you went to Dartmouth College, played soccer there, even turned pro for a while. So you've got a soccer career behind you yourself.
I do. I've played soccer since I was 4. Still play very recreationally in Boston.
Yeah.
But I've just been very fortunate to have had the chance to have that be a part of my life, and opportunities just kept coming, I guess. And I've built a network of friendships and great coaches that have really shaped me and really shaped the outcome of my life.
Well, that's great. And most people, when they play a collegiate sport at that time in their lives, when college is finished, they are finished with the sport. Those who turn pro, usually by age 22 or 23, or they're out of the NBA or NFL. But you've managed to keep your feet in the sport, so to speak, even as you left professional playing yourself. And in forming this organization, it's got a great title, a great name for it, Soccer Without Borders. This really is a cause-driven agenda here. So give us a little bit about the mission of your organization and why you got it going. You're the co-founder, so why did you do this?
So soccer is one of the world's few universal languages, and that can be really powerful. I mean, you think about a World Cup and how many people that brings together, how many people watch, how many people are passionate about it. And so the idea is, how do you use that to influence positive change? How do you use that to motivate kids to reach their potential? How do you use that to build bridges across racial, economic, cultural, religious divides, and really bring people together and build something positive? So that was kind of the idea when we set out, was how do we use this sport that has a lot of really important interpersonal lessons that you can draw on to build character, to build skills, but then also to build community. And we've been exploring that now for 10 years, and I wouldn't say we've got it perfectly right, but we're doing something good. And the model's been working. It's been applied in a lot of different contexts, and we're excited to keep innovating and keep finding a way to use this universal language for positive outcomes.
Mary, I know you've got an office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's where it all kind of comes from these days, and you got 400 or 500 volunteers around the world working with you on this. But let's make it more personal. Let's fly with you down to Nicaragua, maybe drive an hour outside of the capital there to a small town. It's called Granada, after the Spanish town by the same name. Different from the island of Grenada, which has a certain history that we're probably mostly familiar with. You arrive, you probably got there by bus, and just let's make it a startup.
It was in the back of a pickup truck, actually.
Okay, not even a bus. You wish it had been a bus. So you pop out of the back of a pickup truck, and then what?
Our goal when I first went to Granada was to find a way to give access to this amazing sport to girls. That's something that was really not done. There was so many levels of boys soccer and boys sports, particularly baseball and soccer, that had been built. At the time, there was boys leagues from under 10 all the way up to Premier League, professional. But on the women's side, it was virtually non-existent, and there's a lot of cultural, economic reasons why that was so. So the first memory that I have of really seeing what this could do is, we started doing soccer clinics in schools around Granada. And I was joined by my friend Ann Cook, who's now the associate head coach at Penn State. And we, on our way home from work that day, we came across a pickup game. There were 6 men playing 3 versus 3, literally under like a street light. And it was 9 or 10 o'clock at night, maybe a little later.
And you couldn't resist.
And we couldn't resist. So it was two of us women, and then our friend Chepe, who was Nicaraguan, who had been helping us build the program. And so we had 3. We had enough to play in. So, he asked, could we play winner? And they literally just looked at us and laughed. And they had no idea that Ann Cook was a Herman Trophy finalist, played in the WUSA. She's amazing.
You were All-American yourself.
I could try to hold my own, and
Yeah.
so we played in, and it was the typical style. You score, you stay, and we won 9 games in a row. And you could see at first it was, who are these women? And then it was, they're joking with each other. Oh, she beat you, and they were embarrassed.
Yeah.
And then by the end, it was just we were just another team.
Common ground.
And that was when I knew that, this could change people's perspective. They didn't
Yeah.
need to be embarrassed about losing to women. It was just they're good players, and they could see us that way.
Really interesting point, too, because in this case, you're playing against them, but nonetheless, you bridged across the divide by playing against them. The common ground was the game of soccer.
And it's about getting people to see each other for who they are, for their talents, not by some stereotype or some perception of what their limits are.
Yeah.
And getting people themselves to see that too. Helping the girls see you can be anything you want to be. It's not just what society tells you your limits are.
So, Mary, when you are there, maybe the next day after this game, you are a startup. You've arrived. You might have a few contacts there, but you don't have a team. You don't have women out there, girls out there playing.
Yeah.
So take us through the first couple months when you had literally nothing and you had to build something.
It's really about making contacts and figuring out who are champions on the ground. So it wasn't about us being able, me being able to go home and do this from afar. It was who are people here that believe in the same mission. So one of the first things we did was I joined a men's team since there was no women's team, and a lot of the men on that team became coaches of ours. We also managed to find the handful of women that had kind of challenged tradition and were playing, and roped them in to become coaches. And then literally went door to door, school to school, inviting girls to play. And, you do little clinics and show them. They think they can't play. You watch them go through this transformation of, I can't do that. That's not for me. And then, I can. I can get 2 juggles, or I can make that pass. And they get hooked because it's something exciting. It's new. There's an adult that's interested in me and my skills, and I feel positive. And we were able to bring girls into the fold that way and get something started that could sustain.
All people doing startups say they have some great days and they have some really tough ones. So what were 1 or 2 of your setbacks along the way?
There have been many. I think one that stands out, since we're talking about Nicaragua, finding your own limits of what you can and can't do. The challenges of poverty and of equality, they're very complex. And so you can only provide so many services and so many resources. So we had this one girl, Yelba, who lived right next to the one soccer field in town. So she was one of those women. She had grown up playing with the boys, and she came out to our practice, and she was talented. And our eyes lit up and saying, we're not here to make professional players, but this girl clearly has a passion for it. So through the program, she ended up playing for the under-20 Nicaraguan national team, which was very disorganized at the time, but existed a huge breakthrough resource. But just the complexity of the need she had, her parents were really upset that she made the national team. It was in Managua. It meant she couldn't do as many chores around the house. Who's going to pick up that slack? The national team was paying for her bus fare, which they would oftentimes steal. If you're going to have this resource, why should it be used for sport? That's crazy. It was just very complicated. Health issues, somebody who's coming from a background that she had, her nutritional needs hadn't been met, so playing at a higher level, could her body handle that? So it just sort of took us down a road of, can we be a school and a hospital and a counselor and all of these things? What's the limits of what we can do?
And the answer was yes.
And the answer was actually no. We ended up not being able to bridge that for her. At times, it took up, all of our focus was on this one girl. We realized when there were so many others that were in the program, and you can't. How many resources can you devote to one person? So it was really a gut check of what can we do? What can we do well? What are the limits? And when do you need to let someone go if you can't meet the needs that they have? I think that lesson always replays for me is recognizing what you can and can't do, and making sure that the things you do choose to do, that you can sustain them and do them well.
You know, it's like a lot of people getting anything going. They've got a vision of where they want to go, but the actual model of how to do it, you got to kind of event by doing and learning, and
Trial
two steps
and error.
forward and one step back. So that was you. Mary, to reference the title of your organization, though, Soccer Without Borders. So help us understand what you mean by Without Borders.
I think it speaks to the universality of the game, and it also speaks to breaking down barriers. It's about how do we erase some barriers that exist in the world based on different circumstances. So one of our major focus areas right now is on the newcomer population, refugees, asylees, immigrants, and literally borders comes to mind when you think about that, and you think about people who are stateless, have lost their home, have been forced to flee war, persecution, violence, and how can you help them rebuild home in a new place? And soccer is a pretty powerful tool in that effort.
Make the connections. So let's take refugees in maybe Turkey these days, or Greece, or Nicaragua. There are a couple million people traveling by foot today as we speak, as we well know. And as they come into a team, they build at least a relationship with the coaches and the parents and so on. But then how does this bridge into something bigger than soccer itself?
So, you hit the nail on the head there. The family and support of team is incredibly powerful, and the mentor-mentee relationship that's formed with the coach. But then there's other concrete skills and resources that kids need in order to access opportunities and pathways, particularly in the U.S. How do you fill out a FAFSA form? How do you know to take the SAT? Are you prepared for the SAT? What sort of interview skills do you have? Are you comfortable talking with somebody and presenting yourself in a way that could help get you a job? These are all very hard skills that kids need to practice. And coming from a number of different cultural backgrounds, interrupted schooling, they may not have had sort of a pathway that's very consistent that builds up to a job or school, higher education. So we're, trying to fill in those gaps. One of my peers in this work, I thought, had a great analogy the other day. He said, it's like Swiss cheese. There's a lot of holes, and they're not all in the same place. And so you're trying to plug them. It's not about a consistent model that's going to work for everybody. It's about the model that's flexible enough to identify the holes and provide the resources to fill them.
I think historically the U.S. Peace Corps often sent people who would become coaches in developing areas as well. And the model that you're doing or offering up now is not unlike, I think, what the Peace Corps has done historically, which is to help people through an initial engagement in a sporting activity. Could be badminton, could be soccer, could be baseball in some areas, but it's baseball plus, or it's soccer plus.
Yeah.
Let's think about the plus. And how do you, after you've got a team, maybe even a winning team, how do you help, say, the girls in Nicaragua then take the next step in putting their future together?
So one thing we do is try to identify what are the obstacles or the pitfalls that exist. What are the challenges that they're going to face? In Nicaragua, some of the research would tell you that 28% of girls are pregnant by the time they're 18. That's a challenge. 52% of kids don't make it onto secondary school. That's a challenge. So you can identify what are sort of the common pitfalls and how can we shape our program to address this. So one thing in Nicaragua we offer is in sixth grade, we want to bridge that transition to secondary school. So starting in sixth grade, we call half scholarships. Public school in Nicaragua is not free. There's uniforms. There's a small matriculation fee. So can we provide that? The girls when they come to an activity, they earn a point. They can use those points to purchase school uniforms and school supplies. And then in secondary school, we offer full scholarships, which they can actually, if they earn it through the program, positive participation, there's an application that we help with, they can actually choose any secondary school they want, and we pay for it. So we're identifying that this is a period of life where they can go one of two directions. How can we intervene and make sure it's a positive path? So I think that's how the Peace Corps has some very concrete areas that they focus on and people are trained for. And I think what we try to do is similarly understand the culture and context that we're working in and make sure that we shape the program to meet those specific needs.
As I think about the girls, say, who are hopefully heading towards high school or beyond in Nicaragua, I'm thinking they're residential, they're there, their families live there. When it comes to people on the immigrant trail, they're often not there that long, families have been broken up.
Yeah.
So a much more difficult population to work with. How do you go about even creating a team that's sustainable and able to repeatedly play if people are on the move, as they often are as immigrants?
I mean, that is a significant challenge. So one is you want to catch them early and be a resource early. So we work directly with resettlement agencies, with schools, with community partners that would know when people arrive, that they're here and immediately try to get them into something positive. So we don't have a closed door policy with our team. Sometimes our teams can swell to 45 kids over the course of a season or more. It's not what people traditionally think of as a team. But then we do, kids want to play games. And
Sure.
in the United States, playing games means pass cards and paperwork. And so bridging that, how do you get a kid ready to be able to play on the team? That's some, there's a lot of problem solving that our coaches do. And it's also motivation for the kids. They arrive, they play in, they get to know the community. They immediately have access to all the academic support, language support. But to play on that team, they got to stick with it. And, they can vote with their feet. They can kind of control their own fate in that regard.
Yeah.
I will say we had one family that was in our program in Oakland that then moved to Greeley, Colorado, where we have another program, and ended up captaining our middle school team in Greeley. I think it would be so amazing if that could happen more often, because families do move and migrate in order to pursue opportunities where there's jobs. We are seeing a huge migration to the Midwest, Central Plains. Our Colorado program tends to be a second resettlement type of city. And so you do start to see the differences in where people move and where opportunities are.
So, Mary, to put my words on it, you've got a moment where people can be drawn in for the love of the sport. But with that, you open up opportunities and channels to help them take the next step in life, whether it's school or maybe securing employment or who knows, maybe even playing professionally for a year or two. Thinking of it that way, it reminds me again of organizations that start out with a particular focus and it works. But then those who are the creators, or one of the two co-founders, you begin to think, well, what about taking that basic model, soccer now initially, but why just soccer? Why not basketball? Why not badminton? So to use the language, what about the adjacencies? You've probably thought about that so far. You're not into that, but maybe you would be.
Well, I was a basketball player in high school, so I have
Oh, good. You got a head start on that too.
Sport. But we are a part of a network of several networks. But one that comes to mind that kind of speaks to what you're talking about is called Up to Us Sports. And they are a coalition of what we call sport-based youth development organizations. So organizations that are that sport plus, or that are doing more than sport. And it's all different kinds of sports. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's more sports than I knew existed. Basketball, lacrosse, football, golf. There's so many great lessons that you can pull out of different sports.
The sort of youth Olympics, just about everything.
Yeah, it's just, and each sport has different lessons that are inherent.
Yeah.
I really appreciate those of soccer and think in terms of building bridges across culture and across divides, soccer is uniquely suited for that, I think. But I can also see so much value in each and every sport and the skills that it can teach.
Yeah. Thinking about outcome, when you look at the end of the day at what you've done, what would be a metric of when you've succeeded with, let's make it the team down in Nicaragua? How do you know when that particular setting, that particular investment of your time was paying off?
I think measuring impact with kids is incredibly challenging for the same reason that, when you're a parent, you're planting seeds and you don't know exactly what's going to grow. But we have boiled down what we try to measure into 5 things. One is academic advancement. Are they able to gain access to those credentials that are meaningful, that are going to open doors? One is language development, particularly with newcomers. Can you acquire the language skills you need to participate in the economy and access opportunities? One is social capital. So how well are we connecting kids to networks and safety nets? One is healthy lifestyles, which is being a happy, healthy, active person who is able to avoid risky behaviors and value their body. And the last one's personal development, which is I think a little bit more abstract, but we want to develop happy, confident, competent, compassionate people who are good people. I think too often kids have a lot of external expectations that are put on them. Other people define success for them. It looks like Penn or it looks like that job. And we want to equip the kids with the skills they need to reach their full potential, whatever that is for them. And I think that's, for me, if they're happy, healthy individuals who are reaching their goals and aspiring towards that, that's good. That's good enough for me.
Scale here is your opportunity, but also your challenge. You're active in, I think it's some 50 countries. You've got programs in Central America, Africa, and beyond. If we think of it that way, there are probably a billion people out there that are in need of this kind of transitional moment as they leave early childhood and get into later childhood and then on. So in terms of the number of people you're reaching right now and the number of young people you'd like to reach 10 or 15 years out, what kind of scale are we looking at?
So just to, I don't want to overstate our reach right now, but we worked with kids from more than 50 countries of origin, but we haven't actually programmed in 50 countries. Do I think the model could be relevant to really any country? Absolutely. Do we have a goal of being a behemoth nonprofit? No. We want to make sure that the model is effective, that we're being true to the communities where we are, and that we're doing the best we can to meet the overwhelming need. We get approached every single week to open a new program in some city. I know the need is there, the demand is there. So right now we're really focused on the places where we are. How do we maximize that infrastructure? What are the next few places that really have a need that we could replicate? But also, how do we package this tool so that other people like us could take it and run with it and adapt it to their community? We don't need to be experts in every culture and language across the world. But I think if we have a tool that works, then we need to find a way to share it.
And you're probably eminently scalable because you do depend on volunteers. You don't have to raise a lot of money to put a field staff out there. And in that sense, as volunteers are your fundamental building blocks here, in principle, 10 years out, you could be reaching any number of communities, any number of groups around the world.
The volunteers are actually not our building block anymore. We do have staff everywhere.
Okay,
great. So we leverage volunteers for a number of different roles, but it's led by trained staff. I mean, when you're working with kids, I think there's a really strong and necessary vetting process and training process, particularly kids who've experienced trauma, to make sure that the people we put in the field are trained. So volunteers serve a very crucial supporting role, but tend to not be in a leading role. And that is a limiting factor in terms of scale. So what we are looking at is who are the community organizations that we could partner with and that are already there, that already have that infrastructure, have that leadership, see what they're missing. I think one thing that a lot of organizations are missing is women in sport. We have an unbelievable supply of women athletes that is incredibly uncommon around the world. Everywhere I go, it's men who are coaching. And so it's not surprising that women make up less than 10% of soccer players in the world's global sport when they have nobody to see and look to. So I think there's some opportunity areas for things that we as an American organization could export. But there's also a lot of work to be done here in our communities here with newcomers arriving and girls here who aren't accessing sport in the way that they could.
Thank goodness for many things, including Title IX. That's probably had many factors that contributed to women in sports, but Title IX, going way back in our history, part of the U.S. Civil Rights Act, has probably been vital for helping you now have the flow of women who want to work with you.
It was a game-changing moment to mandate equity, and is an incredible statement.
Yeah.
And right now I'm following what's going on in FIFA very closely in terms of mandating not quite equity, but participation by women at every level. That's going to trickle down. It's going to open doors for girls in sport. We're already seeing it in Nicaragua. But I think those who've had the opportunity and that privilege, from my perspective, have an obligation to pay it forward. And
That's great.
I think that is something that really resonates with women in the U.S., that, can we create an avenue that they can step up and try to find a way to pay it forward?
Got a couple more personal closing questions here.
Okay.
Number one, what really drew you into this? What was the, triggering moment or the epiphany that led you to do what you're doing?
I think one moment that stands out is when I was coaching at Lehigh. I was a grad student there, which is how I met the founder, Ben Gucciardi. He launched this out of a Lehigh entrepreneurship program. I had the chance to travel to South America to see the World Cup qualifiers for South America. And I had never been really exposed to the inequality that can exist for women elsewhere. And I saw it. I mean, it was empty stadiums. There was no program. There was coaches who were sitting in the corner in the shade, they were being punished to be the women's coach. And that just really didn't, it just stuck with me. It didn't sit well. And, what can I do about this? And then I met Ben, and he had this phenomenal idea to try to address some of these inequities, to try to really build a microcosm of a better world through soccer. And, it just went from there.
And maybe last query here, as you reflect on who you are now and how you became what you're doing, and think about the moments that did make a difference in your own life course here. For those who might be watching this particular dialogue who are thinking, gee, I might want to do something like that.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for somebody who's maybe involved in athletics or something equivalent, who would like to think about working with the youth of the world to help them get from point A to point B the way you've been doing?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of ways that people can get involved. I think the first thing they should do is really think about the skills they have and what they can bring. I think one sort of misconception is that passion is enough, that, I like soccer, or I like working with kids. There's got to be a way I can help. Ultimately, running an organization is business, and businesses need skills. You need marketing, you need an IT person, you need legal help, you need skills. And I think that moment when somebody says, I can connect something that I do well to a greater good, that's magical. And we are very fortunate to have found people who are willing to help and lend their talents and skills and resources to what we're doing at different moments. One of my former players at Lehigh helped us build a website that was prepared for, the new mobile world. The fact that she would apply her talent and skill for that to this work is amazing. It's opened all kinds of doors for us. So I think really dialing in on what talent do you have to offer, and if it is coaching or teaching, oh my gosh, you are a saint, because people who work with kids, they are so undervalued, and it is a skill. So if that's your skill, please apply it to something, to an organization that's doing this work. But if you have other skills, that can be really useful too.
That's great. Mary, thank you for your great guidance on that, and thank you for joining the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. What an amazing community, and we are so excited to be a part of it in a bigger way.
Great to have you as part of our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.